Hello and welcome to Banking Frontiers Live. We are discussing one of our most favorite topics today, the payments industry. And I have one of the most distinguished person here with me, who is Michael from Swift. Michael Moon is a global payment expert, a great friend, and a wonderful professional from the payments industry who has been sharing us a lot of interesting insights in the last few years during Cybos. And let's learn a lot more from Michael on what's new in payment in the pandemic times. Michael, welcome to Banking Frontiers Live.
Thank you, Babu. You always provide such a warm welcome, so it's always a pleasure to speak to you. And thanks for providing
Thank you.
this opportunity for me.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, let's start our conversation with some very interesting insights that we got about Swift's strategy on instant frictionless payments and securities processing that is marked by the next generation digital platform. So, can you throw some light into it?
So Swift, for the last 12 months or so, Babu has been crafting together with our cooperative, so the industry of banks that use Swift, a new strategy for the organization. And if I start with the drivers, if you like, so what is actually leading to some of our intent here and the types of things that we will be introducing to the community, we're finding that the problems in the industry or the drivers and the needs for change, they correlate around a number of common themes. So the cost base for financial institutions, for example, to make cross-border payments increases all the time, and that's driven by this non-negotiable requirement to be compliant for financial institutions, right? Screening transactions, that kind of thing. You have, for example, the cost of managing liquidity to help with funding payments. So if you're a global payment business, you need to have liquidity and funding around the world. So that's one of the drivers. You also have a more intensive or challenging competitive landscape. There are many new entrants that have, frankly, very interesting ideas on how changes can be made to cross-border payments, changes in the realm, for example, of customer experience, processing efficiencies, different ways of doing things. That's really important. Data is a big driver as well. So the role of richer data to build out new experiences based on that data, and also to support that compliance function I mentioned. They are some of the examples of the drivers that lead to what we're doing from a strategic perspective. And so as a consequence of that, we have elaborated and communicated publicly a new strategy, which is framed around being instant and frictionless on an account-to-account basis around the world. And it's also a strategy designed to support financial institutions participate more fully within higher growth segments of payments. And by this, I mean the really large scale growth that's occurring in lower value transactions and retail and SME oriented transactions as well. So we have a strategy designed to do that. And the way that we're looking to achieve this with the industry is to introduce a new centralized transaction management platform, whereby the centralization of some of these assets, and specifically the payment record itself as a single record, the centralization of that helps the industry do these things. So to give you an example, if you have a centralized payment record and you have parties interacting with that transaction and they share, for example, common financial crime or compliance requirements, they can access those financial crime screening, other types of activities on a central basis. So they don't need to necessarily duplicate the investment costs in their own environment. They can access what has essentially been a mutualized service across the Swift cooperative. So that actually helps drive down cost. One other thing is I mentioned data. So the industry for some time has been moving towards ISO 20022, which is the richer data standard for financial messaging. Swift will be introducing for cross-border payments through the end of 2022 the ISO 20022 messaging, and we will run a period of coexistence for 3 years.
How is Swift working, especially in this use of APIs in the payment segment? Any interesting developments in that?
Yeah, we're adding new APIs all the time to our services, and we're also providing the software developer environments for financial institutions. So we have APIs today that access our Swift GPI service, for example. To be very specific, a bank can make an API call to the Swift GPI tracker, and they can get a response back that tells that financial institution the status of the payment, right? Has it been credited, or is there another problem with it? That kind of thing. So there are plenty of use cases like that. We have APIs for managing cases or problems that you might have with a payment, so you can call that there. You have APIs whereby you access reference data products that Swift has, and we're continuing to add to this library, if you like, of APIs, and including what will be a transaction management environment through this new platform.
So how is it going to change the global payment scenario then during the, what are your thoughts on this digital currencies, especially which are going to be around in the market in the future?
Yeah, there are a lot of experiments and a lot of pilots going on, Babu, and we've seen the direction, if you like, change quite a bit around there. Some markets are more interested in retail type use cases, right? A retail oriented currency. China is a very public example of that. Many of the other central banks are looking at wholesale use cases. We watch that space really, really closely. And the main things, if I was to step back and kind of objectively look at this, the main things that we're looking for is, okay, is there sufficient demand to transact in this new form of money? And the shorter answer is that demand does not exist yet. Yeah. If in future you have sufficient demand from financial institutions, there's trust in it, there's utility and a trend towards having more ubiquity and omnipresence, if you like, of this as well. At a technical level, there are not really, if you like, major things that need to be done to carry a currency.
And I read a lot about trade digitization as an initiative from your side. How is it coming up? What is the market offtake of this entire offerings that you are doing in the area of trade digitization?
So we've been doing a few things, really interesting work. One thing we found is, as the world unfortunately entered into this pandemic we're in, is that the movement of documents stopped. Yeah, and if you have an industry like trade that has a lot of paper, that presents a significant problem in actually, if you can't move and you have restrictions on your movement, you can't move paper from one party to another. So what we did quite quickly is we've always had a service in having digitized versions of letters of credit, for example, that are exchanged on an interbank basis through like a file exchange service on Swift. We put a bit more structure around this, and we introduced this service to some of our largest trade finance banks, and a number of those have adopted that, and they carry now digitalized versions through those files safely and securely between each other, in what would have in the past been carrying paper.
Let's go to the low value payments. Okay. There
Oh yeah,
has
low value payments. Yeah.
a lot of initiatives in the low value payments also from your side. How has it been progressing? What are the plans for this business of low value payments now?
So there's two main things here. So I mentioned with our strategy, instant frictionless account to account and high growth segments of payments, which is essentially low value and SME. And it's the instant, the account to account, and that low value segment that come together here. Two main initiatives, Babu. So when we introduced Swift GPI, because we could track payments end to end for the first time, we observed that most Swift GPI payments happen very quickly. And in fact, about 40% of our Swift GPI payments lead to crediting of accounts in 5 minutes or less. So 40% in 5 minutes or less. Remember, that's going around the world, often multiple parties involved. So the speed of payments is not really a problem today. Seeing that, many banks are actually processing some of these on an instant basis, and we've introduced a service level known as GPI Instant. And the idea there is to bring together the cross-border GPI payment experience and integrate that with the domestic instant payment systems, so that in Singapore, I can make a payment through my bank, and a bank in India will process that, for example, through the domestic instant system in India. The other service is a initiative towards capturing more of these low value payments for financial institutions. And the problem statement is a little bit different there. So if you think about what new entrants and other players in the payment ecosystem are doing these days, they're very focused on the upfront customer experience. Yeah, so they'll build out a wallet experience or an application that a customer uses, and they'll present a lot of information up front to the customer as well. What we're doing with the low value payments service is we're building out some services such that financial institutions can provide that upfront transparency and predictability to the payment in their channel experience that they have with their customers.
Now, Swift has been looking at India, and you have been doing a lot of work in India for quite some time now. In terms of readiness of technology infrastructure to make use of Swift services, how far has India reached, or is there any more development awaited from Swift's perspective from the Indian banks?
So we have about 32 banks now in India that connect into our specific Swift India services. Those banks together capture about 75%. So they potentially address about 75% of the flows in the India market. And our emphasis is really to support the local India agenda, which is governmental and private sector driven, towards digitalizing the India marketplace, both from a payment context and trade. Payments locally in India, I think, is a problem not fully solved, but at least partially or mostly solved. So the domestic infrastructure is fantastic in India, right? The outcomes that things like the National Payments Corporation of India have achieved, and the UPI stack of infrastructure, fantastic outcomes. So, domestically payments, work pretty well in India. We want to be able to link into that from a cross-border perspective, as I explained earlier. However, there's a lot of open runway on trade digitalization. There is still a lot of paper moving around in the India marketplace supporting trade. And that's where we're really focused, is to be able to do some of the digitalization of those services, so that, banks can exchange messages with each other in a consistent, standardized, highly secure and trusted manner. So that's much of our focus. We continue to engage with the financial market infrastructure landscape in India as well. More and more financial market infrastructure based locally in India are joining the SWIFT network.
My last question to you is, what are the new exciting things that you see coming from Swift in the global markets in payments? What interesting things you think see coming into the markets, especially from the payments perspective, in the road ahead?
Yeah, I mean, as an organization, we're very focused on introducing this new strategy, and to do that across 10,000 plus banks around the world is no small task. So there's a lot of communication and activity that works towards that. Watch out for really exciting services within low value payments, right? Look for financial institutions having, if you like, easier ways to optimize their customer experience that's provided towards the customer. Look for more in terms of the growth in the instant cross-border payment services as well. We clearly provide a key role in helping financial institutions and payment and settlement systems around the world facilitate those processes. So those two areas, I think, taken together, are really exciting for Swift as well.
Fantastic. I think that was a wonderful conversation, Michael. And that at least exhausts all the questions that I have had for today for you. And I want to leave something more for the next conversation so that we can keep on the conversation tempo on and learn more from you. So,
Yeah.
thank you very much for sharing all these interesting conversations.
Don't leave it too long until the next conversation, right? It's a fast moving industry. So
Absolutely.
we'll talk again soon.